So I'm going to introduce that work in order to frame the projects that are coming out. So we are basing these investigations on sites that we derived from studies from the Schimberg Center that have to do with low-income housing in Orange County and the immediately surrounding counties. Having in two specific studies, one dealing with something called housing suitability modeling, where they're attempting to use transportation, jobs, accessibility, and other indicators to rate communities. And in this case, they're affordable housing communities. They're looking at existing ones, and probably with an eye toward what can be done to improve those and what can be done to create new ones. And then the other is looking at the fact that in Orlando, there will be a drop-off in housing coming up due to phasing out of those things. So this is one of their maps with our site superimposed on it. One of the things that they did in the study was find clusters. And so these clusters you'll see in the blue there, that's where there are affordable housing developments that are within 800 meters of each other, and therefore form kind of the beginnings of a neighborhood, if you will. So ours focus on some of those, and if you just think of the greenest part of that diagram as being downtown, you can see where we're located around Orlando. One of their studies looked at pre and post Sunrail, so the impact of that transit on the suitability of living in the affordable housing complexes in those areas. This map shows that corridor and their area of influence. It also shows the quarter of these low-income housing tax credit units that are going to be falling off the rolls in Orlando prior to 2030. So our projects aim to come up with ways to create redevelopment opportunities that will help encourage both more sustainable city development and more affordable housing. And again, I've put our others in there. There are additional units, a smaller number, however, that go up. The rolls in 2029 that are actual direct rental assistance. Their study did point out the fact that there would be an increased demand for affordable housing along the corridor. So this is showing pre and post Sunrail numbers here. We do base our investigations on an assumption that not only will there be more demand due to things like transit or other draws in certain areas, but that Orange County is projected to grow by 670,000 people before 2040, and the DOT also has estimated 5.7 million persons growth by 2060 in this super region, this corridor between Daytona and Tampa. So our projects also attempt to react to this growth. We also, in concert with the other G2 studios, recognize the challenges that may come to Florida by virtue of sea level rise, and in addition to a storm surge event similar to that in Katrina, which displaced the populations there, and I believe that only 60% returned, and they did not return into their original homes in many cases, but to other areas. So if there's an event, there's a chance that an area like Orlando could receive a great number of these people. So we'll try and prove that clusters are in fact interesting and important in thinking about ways to redevelop Orlando, and that things like Sunrail and other forms of public transit that we'll propose do matter in making that happen. So cluster 11 you'll see, this one is down here. This is the intersection of 408 and 417. It also is part of something that the Schimberg Center recognizes as kind of it's a region here in eastern Orlando, having to do with the number of units and the proximity of these two clusters in here. It's an incredible disconnection by virtue of the highway systems, and that will be presented to you by Amy, Robert, and Carla. They're the third group presenting. We have cluster 10, which will be the last group you'll see. This is the western side of Orlando, out Colonial. It's Pine Hills, if you're familiar with the area. And so they're identifying that area as a place to redevelop, and that will be Edward, Chris, and Melissa. We'll be starting with this group here in Winter Park. Now, Winter Park was not identified as a cluster. There are, in fact, I think only 2 affordable housing developments in Winter Park, but it has been identified by the Schimberg studies as highly suitable for development. In fact, they're the highest suitability for parcels you'll see in purple and yellow in there. And in fact, that's the target area for this project. And that'll be Shao, Hal, Jana, and Mark. And then finally, we have just south of downtown, in what is becoming kind of a medical district, a project making use of connection to, or nearby connection to the Sunrail, but also looking at downtown as it's been fragmented by the interstates and soon to be repaired. And that'll be Roberto, Christopher, and Kim following them up. So there are preservation recommendations in the Schimberg study group. We hope to add to those or show how they may be implemented. These will be further explored also in the next part of the semester. What you're seeing now will be group work toward developing master plans, out of which students will choose to develop individual projects and then revisit the master plan after doing those studies for the final. Some of the things we've looked at, and you're going to see both practical and fantastical examples here. The full range, because we believe that change happens quickly, and we believe that 30 years is actually a very long time. A lot of the housing in these areas is probably ready for repair, and in some cases we do broadly redevelop, and we do it for reasons like this, which are identified in the Schimberg study, which is a sort of connectivity and network issues. Whether those can be repaired in the situations they're in, which is by and large by developing cul-de-sac type gated communities with only one way in and one way out, or not, is part of the study. So we've looked at accessibility in these terms, and you're going to see some of that occur. This one is quite interesting, and it's in cluster 10, right, which is where the land development code actually requires a buffer and a barrier between a residential use and a retail use or commercial use. And so you end up with a wall creating an entirely unwalkable community. So you'll see ways to fix these kinds of things. So with that,